Hi there. This is Agave Gentryi Jaws, and I'm going to remove it. Even though it hasn't bloomed yet, agaves are monocarpic, and it's going to send out a 30-foot flowering spike, and it's just going to be too difficult to deal with removing that. So I figure, and then it even dies, and it's harder to saw. So I figure, be practical, I'll remove it right now. So it's probably about 6 feet across, and I didn't measure it. Maybe 6 feet tall, or, it's so big and heavy, there's absolutely no way I can just, dig it out and get rid of it that way. Each one of these leaves is actually even quite heavy. It's a succulent, so it's filled with moisture. The one caveat I would recommend if you do decide to remove an agave manually like this is be sure to cover every inch of your skin. Wear protective eyewear. I even wore that face mask there because the sap, some agaves and some people react to the sap. It can be quite caustic and give people a rash. So, wear double gloves and, be well protected and covered. The first day I had a bit of skin showing and I did get a rash on my wrist. But it went away, totally healed after a few days, so it was no biggie. But that's why in the subsequent days, I always wore the gloves. There are a few other ways, to remove an agave, but I've, heard often if you use a chainsaw, that makes the sap fly, and it can be very dangerous that way. Other people have successfully reported using reciprocating saws. I tried that on one agave, and it didn't work well for me. So it probably depends on, if you have a quality brand or whatever. But in this video, I just simply use a 7-inch pruning saw. And I kind of use an old dull one since it gets kind of junky from the agave, all that sap. And I just use a pickaxe and a shovel. So basic of basic, one person, you can remove it with a little effort and, patience and safety precautions. Obviously, this one is just so sharp, so you have to be extra cautious. So the way I remove it basically is just saw off all the leaves, then I get the pickaxe, and I try and break into a spot. Like once you break into a spot in the middle, or maybe I even use the pruning saw bit to get into it, then you can just sort of hack it away, like, the way if you've eaten raw artichokes, it's kind of like, there's this spot where it's easy to kind of hack out the leaves. But this was the hardest one I've ever had to remove because it's just so giant, but this method has worked fine before on, a series of other agaves I had. Also when I've let them bloom before, I've never, in Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area, I've never actually, for some reason, the agaves never really had a fully gorgeous bloom display, so. Another thing is this sap is kind of, after a few days, it's kind of sweet and sickly and kind of smells mildewy. It's quite the smell fest, you'd be surprised. And it was strenuous, so I only did a bit a day. And I was even making sure that I didn't want to get covered in sap and then have a reaction or something. Because, it's a little more dangerous hacking into this with sap flying if you're not properly clothed. I just wore junk clothes knowing I could just throw them out when I'm done. At every stage of this removal, it's far heavier than it looks, so it just made so much more sense to get it in, pieces and chunks I could lift and, easily get in my green bin to be hauled away. I think it took 3 green bins full. I did it over about 8 days or something, removal. And at the end, there's barely any roots. You'd think it would have this giant root system, but it's quite easy once you get the body of it out to just kind of saw. I just use the handsaw, kind of sawing the roots out of the ground and the shovel, but a reciprocating saw could work even better there. So I think for some people that's a totally viable action. I just have a junky reciprocating saw. And I did this, all by myself because I didn't want to risk another person, who's less experienced doing it, getting injured by the sap, or it's just so sharp. So since I'm I was an agave maniac, I vowed never to plant an enormous one again. I still have my share of, smaller ones or less sharp ones, but I've removed enough of these where enough is enough. It is tedious. So I hope my little agave removal adventure has been useful in how when you decide to tackle your agave. Happy gardening!